Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon here with you. We are recording this on Tuesday, February 21st. We were in the process of recording our regular show, and then the news came down late in the process. That's why we're doing this cold open here. News from UCF. Former UCF president John C. Hitt has passed away at the age of 82. He came to UCF in 1992, served until 2018, 26 years leading the university. The impact that John Hitt had on UCF as a university cannot be understated. There's a lot of interesting information on this tribute that UCF shared on their website. I encourage you to go check it out at ucf.edu. The year that he took over, UCF's enrollment was 21,267. The year he retired, it was 66,180. There was an increase of 53% in degree programs, 160% increase in the number of colleges. The average freshman SAT score jumped 30%. Perhaps most importantly, research funding at UCF, 424%. A truly remarkable legacy. Basically, when we talk about the growth of UCF as an institution, from what it was, which, at the time and when John Hitt took over, UCF was more or less a fairly large school, but it was still kind of a commuter school with a decent athletic program. And UCF turned into one of the premier universities in the Southeast under his tutelage. But all that aside, let's talk about athletics, his impact on athletics. In 1992, UCF was a very low Division I program. By 2018, the university was well on its way to being a power institution. And even though the announcement wasn't made that UCF was going to the Big 12 by the time he retired, there's no question that he had a tremendous hand in that happening. Eric, I'll start with you. Softball started under John Hitt. And so you've seen, we all seen him. And Eric and Andrew are with me here to talk about this. What sort of impact did John Hitt have on UCF athletics from your perspective?
UCF's not in the Big 12 without him. I mean, I'd start with that. I mean, you've mentioned softball. He decided to have a softball program, built the softball facility, built an on-campus baseball deal, football on campus. He was very pro at UCF athletics, and because he understood the vision that athletics would help enrollment to the university and bring interest and exposure to the university. I think that's the legacy that he will have. Who knows? There's a lot of presidents that wouldn't have done that necessarily. And I think, to me, that's this legacy. Is a lot of this is built because of him. He pushed it. He narrated. Obviously, the high academics also is pushed. The enrollment numbers you've alluded to. But, Drew, I mean, I toss it to you. You're students. I mean, this thing was kind of growing, but while we were students, and he was at the forefront of a lot of these moves that people at the time were like, is this a great idea? Is this kind of a risk? It wasn't like this was an obvious moves, but he kind of foreshadowed the future in a lot of ways.
Well, look what he inherited. That original arena, the garage, as many of us called it, was not even Division I standard. Now it's the venue, and obviously serves a different purpose. But he came in to a university, as Jeff said, it was a commuter school. It really had no direction. What John Hitt brought to the table was partnerships. That was his thing, was partnerships with a lot of companies in the community. Research Park, the development of that, Lockheed Martin, all those partnerships is what he did. And that also bled over into athletics, where he used networking and partnerships to develop the athletic village, because he had a very hands-on role in the development of that, the building the stadium, the arena, 2 softball stadiums, because you remember there was the first one next to the baseball stadium, and then they moved it out.
Yeah.
So obviously there was the understanding of the investment into athletics, and obviously UCF did not have much money to work with. So it was a very long play. It took a lot of time. A lot of things were done a little bit cheaply because it was what they could do at the time. But as we're seeing, especially with the baseball field, at the time it was Ken Bergman Park, you got the foundation built, and that's what John Hitt brought to the table. Fast forward to now, they're building on top of that. They're renovating, they're improving. So Dr. Hitt, obviously, we were all students when he was there. He was there before us, he was there after us. And I remember walking around campus because, in different ways, we all worked for the school. I worked in the computer labs. You guys worked with media stuff. Mm. And just walking around campus, back then, there was open areas that didn't have development, that was still very small, a little bit sleepy. And then you look at it today, it's a completely different place. It's a city within a city. And you never would have gotten to that point without the work that he did. And I know he ticked off a few of his peers because of what he was doing here was against the grain, was moving UCF from 3rd tier, moving up towards top tier school in the state. And that ruffled feathers. Remember, the medical school, our associates out west fought tooth and nail against UCF getting a medical school.
Yeah.
When UCF and FIU went to present, they knocked it out. Each school knocked it out of the park to get the medical campuses. And look what's happening now. A lot of good stuff happened in UCF, and it all comes back to the work that he did over a 26-year period, slowly putting things in places, building new facilities, bringing in the right people at the right time. You can't say anything other than thank you.
Yeah. I think John Hitt understood better than any other president of any major university in the country when it comes to athletics, that sports is the front door. As they said, we hear that cliche all the time, that athletics is the front door to every university. He understood that. When we look back at, and we talk about the growth of the university, we were all part of that. I was at UCF from 01 to 05 as a student. Eric and Drew, you guys are both around that time. We saw, I think that was when, the gas pedal really got hit in terms of UCF's growth from kind of a niche-ish regional university to one of the largest universities in the country. And the other thing I'm always reminded of, the joke that we used to say that UCF stood for under construction forever. and the reason why that was because John Hitt had a vision for what UCF could be. And through his entire weight behind, getting the funding and support for all the various facilities that UCF needed as a university to become what it is now. in the year 2023. When we talk about athletics, and this will be my one question for the both of you guys, when we think about John Hitt in terms of in the context of the development of UCF athletics from 1992 to now, what was the most impactful decision that he made in his tenure? Drew, I want to start with you. What was the biggest, do you think was the most important thing that John Hitt did in his time at UCF for athletics?
It was the building of the football stadium. In 2005, word starts getting around that UCF's going to have to find a new home for a couple of years because of renovations that were going to be done to the Citrus Bowl. And John Hitt, along with athletic director Steve Orsini and Coach George O'Leary, basically said, well, forget that. Might as well just build one ourselves. And you know what? They did. It wasn't just talk. It wasn't just conjecture. They did. It redefined the entire campus. Now the campus meant something. It brought people home. And look at what it's done over the 15 years since it's opened. We've redefined the school. It's going to the Big 12. It's no longer just some little school that plays 20 minutes off campus where it's in a not great neighborhood. No, you're on campus. You brought everyone home. I think that was the single most impactful thing in athletics he has ever done. And look at the payoff.
Eric, what about you?
He's 100% right. Drew's 100% right. That's the number one. I'll just piggyback and add a couple there. It's because I think the basketball arena should be included there, because I think he understood that if you want to get to a major conference, you can't get in on just football only. You have to be good at other sports. You have to figure out a way to have a great basketball facility for the basketball program, or a baseball facility or softball facility, the volleyball, all of that. He saw the vision from afar there that, because remember, they got blocked obviously from getting to the Big East and, with all this stuff with South Florida, they had to go a different route, whether it be going to the MAC and then finding Conference USA. That was significant. And building. As we've seen with South Florida, they didn't build. They kind of were complacent, and look what's happened to them. Yep. And look what's happened to UCF now. I mean, Andrew's right. Without that football stadium on campus, UCF's not in the Big 12 right now. Who knows where they would be? And I think the other impact of him from an athletic standpoint, he got maybe the best, it's been voted the best tradition in all of college with Spirit Splash on Fridays, which usually would be, it's on homecoming, and we'd always see the football players there, and he would always be out there. That would help the students get involved and get excited for the football games. That was a big influence on that. They're bringing in George O'Leary in there with under Steve Orsini's request there. I mean, if you listen to a lot of the coaches over the years that UCF has brought in and been hired, one of the first people they thank is John Hitt, without question. And I don't think that's an accident.
Jeff, real quick, that the whole athletic village in general has been such a home run that other schools copy it. Florida Atlantic copied it. They actually look at it as an example, and that was his brainchild. He was a major aspect of that, realizing, again, partnerships with area businesses and stuff can make a difference on campus, and it's become quite a hub on football game days.
I can't argue with any of you guys on that. I will say that I think there's a couple of other, important decisions that he made that he deserves a lot of credit for. Number one was backing football moving from 1AA to 1A in the mid 90s. Not to say that UCF wasn't already on the trajectory there, but the aggression with which UCF pursued 1A membership and then and conference membership too, like we talked about earlier. Yeah, there was it is by now obviously well documented that South Florida stood in UCF's way. Now, part of that might have been some overplaying of the hand from some of President Hitt's athletic directors. But nonetheless, it's not like it didn't happen. And UCF was very aggressive in trying to find the proper home for its programs in a conference. And I think that that finally came to fruition with the move to Conference USA out of, the MAC for football and ASUN for everything else. And of course, previously football was an independent. Once UCF was able to get into Conference USA, I think that was really the catalyst for a lot of the things that we saw from athletics in terms of moving things out. And I think the other thing that John Hitt deserves a lot of credit for, and I will maintain this as part of his legacy, was his commitment to women's sports as well. We saw the commitment to, soccer was already quite good, but but under his guidance, he made sure that his athletic directors continued to put resources into women's soccer to make it nationally competitive. Volleyball was on a little bit of a lull there for a bit. They came back under John Hitt. We've talked about how UCF softball started under John Hitt. The track and field program was very successful. The rowing program has been very successful. And I really do believe that the success of certain athletic programs at any university, it's we can talk about obviously the athletes, right? But that also filters to the coaches, and that filters to the administration. And the part of that administration is your sports administrators, your athletic director, and it goes all the way up to the top, the president. That's why UCF has become a juggernaut, not just in the big sports, but in all sports, in particular women's sports. We've talked about the success of UCF's women's sports over time, and I think that John Hitt at least deserves some credit for putting resources and money and momentum towards UCF's women's sports. And that's why this is an athletic program for the 21st century, Eric.
No doubt. And not at the expense of academics either. It's not like a lot of the, you mentioned the women's sports, a lot of the female athletes are drawn to come here to not only play here, but because to go to school. I mean, there's a ton of female athletes go to the business school, for example. There's so many options. And then just being on campus. I've had how many athletes have told us, man, just being on campus. That was all the vision. Drew mentioned earlier about under construction forever, but that was the vision there. Every
recruit, their family, the families come in and they're like, to a person, they're all like, I had no idea about this place. It's amazing. Everything is so great.
And it's hard for the young people to understand that. Like for baseball, for example, when I got to school here is when they literally opened the baseball stadium on campus. They used to play at Tinker Field next to the Citrus Bowl in downtown Orlando. It just sounds insane. Basketball, Drew mentioned it. I mean, what was it, 1,000 capacity?
No, it was a little more than that.
It opened in 91, and they had just moved. It was the capacity of the old arena was 5,100. They had just moved from the education gym.
Right. Yeah, it was absolute trash. And the thing is, at that old arena, you could yell from one corner of it to the other, and they could hear you during a game.
Correct. Which has its good points sometimes.
But there's no question. Look, all of this, he saw the vision. He okayed it. He was pro athletics. He's going to be in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. I would not be surprised if he headlines the class next season as they get into their first year, ironically, into the Big 12 conference. And I think, to me, I will say it again, if John Hitt's not here, UCF as a university is not as big as it is. Like, I still get people asking me how blown away they are by the enrollment, right? That's the big thing. That's not without John Hitt's work that he put in. And UCF wouldn't be going to the Big 12. UCF wouldn't have a lot of this stuff they have without him. He's the you cannot mention any of the UCF's growth in any department, academics, athletics, without mentioning John Hitt.
All right. John Hitt, passing away at the age of 82. On behalf of all of us here with Black and Gold Banneret, we thank him for the opportunities that he gave us as students and later alumni to celebrate the thing that we all have in common, which is UCF athletics. And we thank Dr. Hitt for everything that he did, and may he rest easy. A job well done for UCF's former president. All right, we're going to start the regular show right now.
This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, Here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
Welcome to the show, Jeff and Eric, along with Kyle and Drew. We got a busy show today that we have as we approach the end of the month of February. We got basketball to talk about and just two absolutely spleen-rupturing losses for UCF men's basketball. Women's basketball is continuing to kind of really struggle toward the end here, so we'll wrap things up with this as we approach the beginning of March. We sleep in May, right? Who's that writer again, Eric? I forget his name.
The writer?
Yeah, who said we sleep in March? The guy,
Oh, John Rothstein.
John Rothstein. Thank you. Sorry, Roth. And then we also, at least we have some. We have baseball to talk about. Season opening sweep against Siena, so that's solid. Softball, Eric Lopez, very productive weekend out in Clearwater, including a win on national TV.
Yeah, you can tell by Mike Tan I was from Clearwater, but yes, fun weekend.
Yeah, you look like I need to send you the SPF, brother. What the hell?
Hey, listen, finally something to distinguish the look between him and our own Drew Glukov. I like it.
That's true. It's very true. That's
so,
the goal.
Yeah. So we got a lot here, but before we get started, though, there is one thing that I want to address, and I've been getting questions about it, and we've talked about it prior to this. But those of you who are wondering about, who may or not have been following, what's going on in the corporate goings-on with Vox Media and SB Nation, SB Nation has decided to demonetize our podcast. All right. Now, that doesn't really mean much to you, and it doesn't mean all that much more to us. We're not getting paid a whole lot for this podcast anyway. But what it does mean is that in the coming weeks, we're going to be rebranding the podcast. All right. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and what we're going to do is, all of you are familiar with our night shift show on video. Eric, you guys did a great job on Sunday night, and the latest one with the watch along of UCF softball against Mississippi State, which we'll talk about later. That I think, and we all agree, that brand has been so successful that we will, come the end of this month, when and again, Vox Media is forcing us to rebrand this podcast, that we will rebrand the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast as the Night Shift Podcast with us. Now, what'll that mean for you, the listener? Not a whole lot. You won't even have to change feeds. All right. And we're thankful for SB Nation for at least, if they're going to unload us, they're at least doing it in a relatively user-friendly way, at least in terms of what we know. But it is a change. So if you pop into your feed looking for our podcast after February 28th, 1 week from today, when we're recording this on the 21st, and you're like, what is this Night Shift Podcast? Trust us, it's us. We just had to change the name around. All right. So want to get that out of the way. I'll have more details for you probably on Twitter. So follow me, Jeff_Sharon. Follow us, UCF Banneret _SBN. By the way, what about the website? Website's not changing. All right. Website's not changing. You can still go to Black and Gold Banneret. We are still part of SB Nation in terms of our written content. It's the podcast content that's going to be changing brands. I know that sounds a little weird, but don't worry about it. We'll be fine. All right. Let's dive into our topic of conversation here. Enough corporatism. Let's start with UCF men's basketball, who just, oh my gosh, these last two games just were absolute killers. 15-11 right now, 6-8 in the conference. They came into last weekend at 500 in the league. And with two, let's face it, tough but winnable games. At Memphis on last Thursday, home versus Cincinnati on Sunday. They lose the Memphis game 64-63 on a steal and a bucket in the final 10 seconds when they were up 63-62. And then against Cincinnati, down 9 in the second half. By the way, the Memphis game, they were down big and fought back in that game. And then against Cincinnati, again, fought back. Tied game at 71. Great defense in the final minute. They forced Cincinnati into two backcourt turnovers to tie the game. And then David DeJulius hits a running, flailing floater with 0.2 of a second to go, and UCF loses 73-71. These two losses are just killers, man. I don't know how else to say. I mean, positioning for whatever aside, I mean, UCF was already, climbing a way uphill battle, and they were going to likely going to have to win the auto bid in order to get to the NCAA anyway. But this doesn't help, right, Eric? I mean, these were two. I don't recall, by the way, two consecutive losses this gut-wrenching like this in men's basketball, maybe ever.
Well, that's hard to say. Of course, I'm the wrong guy to ask, who just watched in person 2 back-to-back walk-off losses, so we'll get to later. Anyway, well, basketball.
Rough week for all of us.
Yeah, a little rough for everybody. I mean, we could tell. And folks, if you hear Kyle's voice, not 100%. I mean, the guy, no one's taking these losses harder than Kyle.
Kyle's literally sick.
Yes,
literally. These losses are making them sick. And look, it's gut-wrenching, right? I mean, these games, what is it, 9 games by 1 possession, I feel like they've won?
I did the math for the recap yesterday. UCF has played 10 games this season that were either decided by 1 possession or went to overtime, and they are 4-6 in those games.
That's as close to the edge as it gets. I mean, that's the sport for you in a nutshell. If the ball bounces a certain way, you have a completely different season. It's kind of what makes sports great, what makes sports very frustrating. And this is the case, down to the wire plays, got to make them. And in these cases, Cincinnati, give them credit. They made the play, one extra play at the end with 0.2 of a second.
Yep.
And then the Memphis, they make a play with the defensive play. It's just one of those things. You can't question the effort. You've seen bright spots there. The Memphis game, they dug themselves a hole. That the good news is UCF doesn't have to ever play there again unless they choose to. And I don't, we'll down there. I like Beale Street as much as the next guy, but certainly, I mean, we've had Taylor Young here. What is it, like 1-20 now at Memphis? Like nothing good ever.
One win at Memphis. I think it was like one. It's not that rough. It's like 1-12.
I think it is. I think it's like.
Let me see.
I think about all the CUSA tournaments that have been in Memphis. You count those. I mean, I still can't.
Oh, if you count those, I mean, goodness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I still can't get off the Morris Allman 3-point shot for Rice in 2007 that knocked UCF out of the opening round. So, and then the Cincinnati game, it's tough, guys. It just is what it is. I mean, that's where you kind of appreciate like the BJ Taylors and Aubreys that finished games, back in 19. Not that these guys didn't finish, but I've said this stat over and over again. You give up over 70 points. Yeah, I'm just as. I
know we're making Kyle literally sick right now. He's like hacking up a lung.
They have to come over and give him a hug or something. My goodness, poor Kyle. This basketball season, this season's made him sick. But over 70 points. That's
been the barometer.
I think they played much better second half defenses in both of those games, but they got off. Yeah, they have not played at the level defensively that they did early on in the season when they were playing at a level very similar to 2019. They were playing at a high level, partly injuries. You mentioned, obviously Michael Durr's been talked about. I'm going to still bring it up. I know people keep forgetting this. CJ Walker only played 4 games this year. This is a guy that at one point people believe will get paid for a living to play professional basketball. We can't just dismiss that like, oh, well, that's just no big deal. That's a big deal. Because then it causes a rippling effect when you lose a Michael Durr. Now you're hurting there.
Plus the fact that even if you play the rest of the season, and as I've said before, and you guys have heard me use this cliche before, and I got to thank my dad for it. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But
or Hanukkah, settle down, Drew.
Yeah, but
I feel attacked.
But even if the Durr injury still happens, but you still have CJ Walker, you still have that extra big. I mean, I think that certainly affected UCF in terms of the rebounding. And this is a team that's actually, I think, performed fairly well on the boards, all things being equal. That 5-game stretch where I think the South Florida game really hurt. We went back and I looked at BartTorvik.com. He has this really interesting tool where you can change the results of games and see what the net rankings look like and where you would be in the field of 60, 68. And I had to stop myself there for a second. And I was like, all right, well, let's play around with this. If you flipped the Mizzou game, which UCF won on a desperation shot, or UCF lost rather on a desperation shot at the buzzer. The South Florida game, which we should have beaten them in that game, in my mind. And then the last two, which were lost at the buzzer. UCF is in the last 4 in. And those are 4 coin flips. Well, except for the South Florida game. That one, you want to have that one back. But I mean, geez. And then if you want to get real fun, you could flip the Miami game, which was lost at the Horn. And then you're like bona fide in the tournament, so it's tough, man. It's just really, it's one of those seasons where you're like, it feels like you're calling tails never fails and everything pops up heads.
Right. I think that the expectation we got to remind people of, Jeff, is at this time at the beginning of the year, right? We had that situation where the cupboard was basically bare. You had DJ, you had CJ, and that was, you didn't remember, sure, Ty Freeman, and you had a few other guys in the from last year that were in the rotation. But we mentioned Freeman, he gets hurt at some point. DJ doesn't start the season. CJ's on the shelf. And by the way, you're talking about these buzzer beater games. Listen, those happen. I get it. But please don't try to tell me that Temple comes in this house and wins with Jameel Reynolds if Michael Durr is out. We are not. I know Eric mentioned that we already mentioned Durr being hurt. I don't think we're talking about it enough. The fact that the depth at the front court earlier in the season, I was about to call him Coach Johnny Walker. No.
Well, maybe that's.
I'll tell you what, some of these losses it would have been enough to do that to a weaker person. I'll tell you that.
I mean, right? Yeah, it's at the very least being a co-pilot. I get it, but no. Coach Johnny Dawkins has said that this front court is among the most deep since that team with Taco Fall and company. Right?
Yeah.
So that depth, goodness gracious, if he didn't have that, how much worse off would they be? Is one question. There's just so many things. By the way, the return of Michael Durr, if we got to mention something positive in here so I can put the bottle down for a moment. Durr comes in and has a season high game of 15 points, by the way, against Cincy. If that doesn't prove the impact he has, I don't know what does. So I before people are like, oh, well, you're fans and you're just blah, blah, blah. I mean, the South Florida thing, Jeff, yeah, it kind of is in that case, but that's okay. I'm not mad at you. But I also think that's a Durr situation as well. If he's present, if somebody big is present, a lot of these things go a different way. Over and above the heartbreaking buzzer beater stuff. And we talk about, what is it? A chuck from half court, these killer flailing shots as you're talking about. I know those are heartbreaking in their own right, but we got to get in a little X and O there. As much as people are going to put this on Johnny Dawkins, which is adorable, fans. I know fans blame the coach for everything when it doesn't go well. But this is a lot of, I would make the argument that Dawkins is the only reason a conference tournament will could possibly propel UCF to another postseason place. A lot of other lesser entities, especially considering Dawkins' salary, I say again, people, the mean green. If let's pretend, first and foremost, among anything else with performance, it's his salary that's keeping him in the building. Let's be real, right? With all that it put together, the fact that it's even this much of a chance of postseason action, I think, is in itself a Herculean effort. Fans, this is how good a job Johnny Dawkins did, guys. We were expecting basically nothing from this season because of all the departures that took place and what little air quotes we had returners as far as, from this year to last year.
Right. Basically three regular guys coming back from last year.
It was a new team.
And all the injuries, a completely different team for the most part. And actually, there's another team that had even fewer returning starters from last year. More on that later, I'm sure. But with all of that, you managed to forget, fans, how far along, or how far behind, I should say, this team was. And they've come this far along since, right? I think
Yeah,
I'm arguing that Dawkins did a good enough job to make himself look bad. I guess I don't know.
Well, no. You bring up a point. You bring up the point right there. His success is why people are frustrated. Because if you really look at the Johnny Dawkins era, it's the best era in the Division I era in UCF basketball. I'm a big Kirk Sparrow guy, all right? Yeah. But you look at the Kirk Sparrow era, it was up and down. And that's what happens when you're in a small league like the A-Sun. You're basically your season comes down to 1 week, which is the conference tournament. Kirk was very successful 4 times. Props. But you look at what happened at CUSA, Kirk struggled. Look at Donnie Jones, struggled. Do you realize Johnny Dawkins right now, they're on pace. I believe their Ken Palm is in the 50s. They're on pace to have for the third time, have a rankings in the Ken Palm or the net rankings, RPI, whatever you want to use, in the 50s or better. They never did that under Donnie Jones. They didn't do that under Kirk Sparrow. They're always in the hundreds. So this has actually been a good era. The problem is there's a percentage of people out there that think we're a basketball school when they probably haven't been to a game. So, and we're not. It just hasn't.
Newsflash: UCF has never been a basketball school in the division.
No, it hasn't.
And to your point, Eric, I want to say this really quick. The reason why you need to hit that, because you're absolutely right, UCF never has been a basketball school, may never be, and that's okay. But all those awesome stats that you mentioned about rankings and all these polls and all that, the UCF fan doesn't know anything about. So again, they don't know how good they got it. That's what I'm getting at.
To some, they don't care either. They see very black and white. They don't see the underlining tones that can build towards success. However,
I think, Drew, I'm sorry to interrupt, Drew. I think that what you're trying to say, though, and I want to know what you think specifically about this, Drew, is I think that this is what happens when you're a, quote, football school, end quote, right, is fans apply football logic to basketball.
Exactly.
Yeah, they expect, tournament or bust.
Yeah. If you don't win, you suck, and and you don't, you lose this one. The season's over. And like, no, you got to let the season develop.
And think about it, college football mentality. Over 80 teams out of the 134, I think it is, get into a bowl game. That's well over 50%. Now let's apply that to college basketball. There is about 330 Division I teams or so, give or take. Yep. 68 get in the NCAA tournament. 32 get into the NIT. 16 get into the CBI. That's it. Now let's look at where UCF's currently sitting. Did a little bit of bracketology lookup. UCF is in every NIT bracketology right now as either a 3, 4, or 5 seats. They're right in the middle of the hunt. So this could easily be an NIT team that's playing in the postseason. And don't poo-poo the NIT. There's a lot of good teams playing postseason basketball in that tournament. Otherwise, they wouldn't be playing basketball in that tournament.
Especially with this team that had no expectations. There was no nobody said this team should be a tournament team. Like, again,
listen, I got receipts from people prior to the season who'd be like, "Oh my God, we're not even going to make the NIT with this roster." I got receipts, folks.
It's been a good.
And here's the thing: the NIT is not like the CBI, which is a pay to play tournament. It's actually owned by the NCAA. It's respectable, and it's basically it's basically the second grade tournament. But when only 68 out of 330 plus schools get in, you know what? You being in that second tier, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're still in the top third of the country.
Yeah.
Think about that. UCF, not a basketball school, in the top third of the country.
Right.
This was the school, okay, prior to Kirk Sparrow, that had arguably the worst Division I basketball program in the country. If you look up the 80s, there was not a worse basketball program. There's no history here. We're not a blue blood. Look at the blue bloods this year in college basketball. Louisville has 4 wins this year. 4. North Carolina.
Here's one for you, Eric. Go look at Florida State. Remember that game in the schedule? We were like, all right, Leonard Hamilton coming to town, and they're in the 200s in the net.
Well, no, let me ask you, because you went to Syracuse. That is a basketball school, with all due respect to Donovan McNabb and company.
Yes, Syracuse is a.
What has happened to Jim Boeheim the last few years there?
He checked out a few years ago. And
he's collected a paycheck at this point.
He just decided to coach until all of his sons were done graduating, and then that was it. Like he's
well, there you go. I mean, they're going to miss the tournament this year at the NCAA Syracuse, barring a run in the ACC tournament. North Carolina was the number 1 preseason ranked team in the country right now.
And they may not make the tournament.
Right.
Right.
And these are programs that care about basketball, that invest a ton of money in basketball, and they're struggling. So now
Carolina might not make it. Like who else?
Duke is struggling.
Yeah, Duke is hanging on. We talked about Wisconsin, who's usually in there, is struggling. Texas Tech, Arizona State, these other teams. I mean, are they Duke and Carolina? No, but we usually see their names pop up on Selection Sunday more often than not, and they're not. They're struggling.
Look at a program like Ohio State, which is usually like a kind of like a second tier team that gets in the tournament. Yeah. They're terrible. They're absolutely terrible.
Blown out every night in the Big Ten, it seems like. And I'm not trying to be funny. I mean, Coach Holtman's a good
Florida's bad this year.
Florida's not going to make the tournament. Miami's probably the only team in the state, really, and then FAU. But FAU, again, is in a small league in CUSA where everything's more of a, you can have a good year. So it's hard, man. It's hard. Look, I'm not saying you have to be happy. I mean, it's frustrating. Believe me, we're all. Look at poor Kyle. I've never seen him. I'm worried for his well-being. Like, we need some wins to get this guy out of his bed.
He needs a wellness check.
Well, let me spin that forward. Nice segue, Eric. 4 games to go. 2 road, 2 home. Wednesday night, South Florida. At Tulsa. Oh God, we got to go to Tulsa again. At Temple, another relative house of horrors, and then ECU on senior night, March the 5th. Now, win out, and you're at 19-11, and 10-8 in the league heading into the conference tournament. My next question to you is, and I want to go to Kyle actually for this one first. Let's say that happens. All right. And I think the Temple game is going to be the toughest one out of all those. But anyway.
That's interesting.
Because it's on the road. I think if it's at home, it's a different thing. But
it is, but again, I'm looking for Durr versus Reynolds and seeing what happens. The only reason Reynolds was made the biggest factor is because they had a lot of backcourt issues and injuries. But I digress.
Yeah. But all right. So let's say let's go best case scenario regular season. They win out. They're at 19 wins. You go into the conference tournament. We checked it. If they stay right now in the standings as it is, if this conference tournament started right now, guess who UCF will play in the first round? USF. So from that perspective, does this team have enough to make a surprise run in the conference tournament? And if so, what's the thing that we would need to see them get better at so that they peak at that moment?
So I can answer your final question first. Stay bleeping healthy. Good God, that is definitely the biggest thing, and it's not close. Nobody else go down for the rest of the season. And you're like, oh, but Kyle, that's obvious. Listen, fellas, last year, the guys got hurt at this time last year and completely canned any hope of NIT and things like that. And this is a better team than that one. And you want to know what else that team did last year? They took care of business against USF in the first round of the conference tournament. By the way, they had both their big guys in CJ Walker and Chikembake Jeong on the floor. By the way, thank you for the opportunity to mention Bake. I appreciate that, Jeff. It's always fun to talk about him.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But with all that in mind, and I mentioned the front court specifically, while CJ Walker won't be on the floor, Taylor Hendricks and Michael Durr are an excellent starting front court pairing. Big fan. And if you're not a fan of Taylor Hendricks by now, regardless of your UCF fanhood, that's a you problem. But, and I'll excuse any USF people in that conversation because he's probably had good games against you, but or a good game against you. But I think the opportunity to sweep is there. That's always, tough to win out like that in a pressure situation. But I think there's a lot of reasons why that looks good. One, for any panelist who's talking about UCF's future, should they be successful in the conference tournament as well? And we're talking NCAA or NIT. The fact that you came back healthier and prevented sweeps from conference teams, psychologically, that's a good thing and that's helpful. Which in the case of Temple, Temple and USF in particular, that's
those are two games that they look at and they're like, man, we got to get them back for those games.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you do that, the panel will be like, well, you were without all these guys and then you got them back and you beat them. Interesting how that works. It's psychologically for the panel evaluating that means something, right?
Yeah.
Now, and I know Drew's going to come in. Well, this math will negate that. Sure, they have to win all the games first, Drew. I understand that. But I think the opportunity is there. And I think as long as that front court stays shored up, they got a rotating kind of a triangle nucleus there with Taylor Hendricks, Lehat Thune, Michael Durr, all that I think's enough. And then you listen, CJ Kelly, for a guy who was starting out the season as the top backup, has come in, put in big time minutes, done his job, played through some big, I say big hits, but this is a guy who has gotten throttled at times on the floor, playing as an oversized guard, getting into spaces that guards don't normally get and getting bumped around doing it and still thriving. This guy, man, listen, he might be between him and Durr. We're going to have a lot of conversations in the Bannies about best transfer this year from those two guys alone. Mark that, Bryson. Anyway.
Anyway.
So.
Elo,
that's gonna be a tough one to vote on. Is going to be transfer of the year. There's got a number of candidates.
I know we might have to do like multiple ones, but actually, Drew, let me go to you and then Elo to wrap this up. What do you think? They got enough? If they pull it together, they think they got enough gas to make a run?
Well, I don't think they're going to win the conference tournament.
Right.
I just, a lot of this is, as Kyle said, is psychological. When you lose on those buzzer beaters, it takes the confidence out of it. And as we've seen with those one possession or very short deficit games, they have trouble closing out. That's a mental thing. They miss key shots. Look at what happened against Memphis. They had multiple chances to put that one away, and they missed each one of them. They blamed the coaching. In the end of the game, players make shots. Do they make the shot? Do they not? You had guys missing at point blank range. I mean, what more can you do? You're in position to make the shot. You don't make the shot. That becomes a confidence issue that gets in your head.
That's obviously the coach's fault, Drew. What are you talking about?
So, the next 4 games, very important. You got a couple of chances for revenge. Get those out of your system. They win all 4. It doesn't matter what happens in the conference tournament. They're going to be in the NIT, guaranteed at the minimum. They're still, between a 3 and a 5 seed right now, depending on which bracketology site you're looking at. That's very healthy. So there's room there. I don't think they're going to fall out of the NIT outside of an epic collapse to close this season. They should at least make the second round of the conference tournament. Then it starts becoming a little bit more of a crapshoot. But I don't see them winning it all. I don't see them getting in the NCAA tournament. There's just not enough left in the season to pull it off. But the season's far from over. And as I said before, the NIT is still, the fact you qualified for it, it's not like something you buy into.
Right.
It's still something to be proud of. Look what they did, the first year when they went to the NIT semifinals. You remember that game against Illinois? The house was packed. The atmosphere in the arena was insane. I mean, they can get there. They can do that. It can happen again.
Yeah. I tell you, it is one of those things. And I think we're going to find out right now, like, what is the mental toughness of this team? Eric, I want to wrap up with you here. And that's kind of what I look at is you can do one of two things. You can say, well, geez, it's just not our year. And then you fold mentally because of those close losses, or you buck up and you say, hey, we left a few on the table there. Now's the time to really rally. We should have these games. We should have had these games. Let's finish out here and do what we're supposed to do. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, no, they're going to play hard. I mean, they've played hard just about every game. I don't think that's a concern. It's totally different character there. Again, they just haven't had some have not had good fortune really in most of these close games. But look, if our NITologist Drew Glukoff is correct and making the NIT, this team would be 3 postseason seasons under Coach Dawkins. If they finish strong, it would be their 4th time they've had 19 wins or more in the Dawkins era, which is way more than the previous UCF coaches in the Division I era had since Conference USA 2005. I'm not counting A-Sun. Again, A-Sun's a different ballgame. So, again, we're actually in a very successful run basketball-wise in UCF basketball history. Could there be some tweaks? Sure. But there ain't many people that can have this. I'm telling you, there is not many coaches in this country that would take this job at the current climate that it has. Not unless somebody else wants to donate $4 million or $5 million on a consistent basis to the basketball program and help improve other facilities. Because I'm telling you, this is not an easy job. It's the hardest job of any UCF coach of any UCF sport on campus, by far.
That's a hell of a sales pitch there, Eric.
Yeah, let me cue up Dr. Evil. We only need $4 million, right?
Well, I mean, I looked at it before. We're what, 2nd or 3rd from the bottom in the American,
right,
in men's basketball budget. I think we're right there with like South Florida and ECU, and moving that into the Big 12. Now, you could say, well, obviously that's going to improve in the Big 12. Well, you hope so. But
not guaranteed, but it's not guaranteed.
It's not a guarantee because there's there's a lot of football infrastructure that's also going to be coming that way too. So, man, it is one of those things where it's right there, but the investment, I think, man, I hope it's coming. It's because, this program deserves it.
The lack of revenue is obviously the coach's fault, Jeff.
Yeah, all you gotta do is bring in a new coach, and money will just magically appear. Magic.
I'm gonna leave that one right there.
Oh boy.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we got some softball and baseball to talk about. Eric is still recovering. He's got the aloe vera out from his trip out to Clearwater for UCF softball.
I think he looks good. What can I say?
I just want basketball to win some games so Cal can be healthy again. My goodness, this
I know. We need this one on. We need this one on Wednesday night against South Florida, no doubt. Get these guys back. Send them limping back to Tampa with their last loss in the series.
Oh, look at them.
Kyle's like, oh my God.
Jeff, you're the PA guy. Fix it.
You're the PA guy. Fix it. That's my favorite one. I like it.
Yeah, I know. I got to get there. All right. Stick around. I'll be right back. This is Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
We're back here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Eric, Drew, and Kyle with you. I got some football stuff I wanted to touch upon real quick, as Kyle is still just reeling at the moment from the previous basketball segment. There's been some discussion of some rule changes in college football. The college football commissioners are considering 4 in particular that we wanted to talk about. I got Ross Dellinger pulled up here to talk about them. Let's see. All right. I want to take a quick poll. Thumbs up, thumbs down, the 4 of us. All right. Rule number 1, preventing consecutive time. These are all to speed up the game. Preventing consecutive timeouts, i.e. no more icing the kickers. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up.
All right. All 4 thumbs up. Okay. Number 2. No longer extending the first or third quarter for an untimed down if that quarter ends on a defensive penalty.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. I didn't know that they did that for the first and third. I know you do that at the end of a half,
Yeah,
But I didn't know they did that in first and third quarter. That was kind of
It
weird.
actually came up in a game. Somebody screwed up a call at one of UCF's games, and I forget which one it was. Drew, you'll probably kickstart it. But they were going to flip into the next quarter, but there was a penalty, so they rolled it quarterback, and it was just a bunch of confusion. I forget which game it was this season, but
I forget which game it was myself, but
you remember it happened.
It's not a necessary thing.
I
don't think that one will affect too much.
Right.
No,
That's still a rare occurrence.
That's why Dellinger calls it non-controversial.
Yeah, because there's not enough evidence for it to be controversial. The third and fourth ones are actually pretty interesting. All right, number 3. The clock will continue to run after the offense gets a first down, except inside of 2.5 minutes. What do we think? Thumbs up?
Thumbs up. Hallelujah. 100 finally. Come to your senses.
I'm okay with it as long as they keep the clock stoppage in the final 2 minutes.
See, and that's the best compromise. I mean, listen, for all intents and purposes, this game is actually to prepare players for the pros. So in my mind, it should always be running. And I never understood what the first down stoppage personally. But for those like Jeff, who are the purists, who want the first down stop to remain, that final 2 minutes, great compromise. Listen, I'm complimenting the committee here. They did something right.
All right. The fourth one, which Ross characterizes as the most controversial proposal. The clock will continue to run after an incomplete pass once the ball is spotted for play. Thumbs down, I say. Elo's going to be thumbs up on this one, isn't he?
Yeah, sure. Let's get out of here. Let's go home, man. 2 hours. Let's go. All right, we got lives to do here.
Why are you
there?
Give me a good. Not your like. Okay, you got stuff to do and things to see and people to do, as they say. What's the reason why you're in favor of this? I want to know.
Actually, I'm not in favor of that last. I'm not.
Okay.
But I am in favor of speeding up the game because we're all hypocrites. On one hand, we're concerned about the player's health and CTE and brain, but on the other hand, it's like, let's run 80 plays, 90 plays down everybody's throat. I think it's insane. I think, to me, the first down thing is easy. Like, nobody huddles anymore in this sport. Like, it's not going to affect them that much. It's not like, oh my God, we're huddling and we got all this clock. I think we do need, and I think it would help the product because I think there are too many coaches, Josh Heupel, that is more concerned about running 90 plays and trying to get the defense off balance than actually executing the play. And I think maybe now that the clock's constantly running, coaches will actually be more focused on actually executing the play instead of trying to worry about running as many plays as quickly as possible. I think that's a big problem in the sport.
Chip Kelly's a Big Ten coach now, too. Give him his credit, man.
So, no, I think it's good. I saw when the college football this past year averaged 3 hours and 20 some minutes. That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, Kyle, you and I covered the NFL. Like an NFL game that goes 3.5 hours is like what? Once in a blue moon, maybe when Rihanna's performing at halftime. I mean, get a Super Bowl. That's about it. Like it's insane. And a football game should never go longer than 3 hours. Never.
3 hours should be the target, but to your point, there are things that can happen. Pass happy teams. Injuries, sure. The way the Jacksonville Jaguar playoff victory against the Chargers went, you could see why that was long because of the nature of the game and
sure
all the turnovers and stuff. But yeah, overall, I think 3 hours is a good target. But then again, we talk about the NFL. It's a lot easier for them to demand revenue per ad minute or second.
But that's what's interesting, though. The NFL does a great job with the revenue. Trust me, no sport makes more revenue than the NFL with sponsors and everything. But they don't mess up the TV product. Like they find a way to.
But that's my point, Eric. They can't charge as much for airtime per second or whatever because the cost of playing football, generally speaking, stays the same. The product that the revenue demands doesn't, right? So if you're somebody who's in, let's say, not to talk trash on the conference that UCF is now leaving, but the American, who is not in the Power 5, but is a bigger G5 entity, made a great campaign, at least theoretically, being a Power 6, being kind of that mid-major in football, to steal a term, right? they don't necessarily have that same revenue and can't be like, oh, well, we want to shorten games, screw commercials. That conference can't afford to do that. So that's something got to wrestle with, and they got to get creative and streamline the game itself, which I think these rules do. Go ahead.
Well, here's something to keep in mind, and you kind of tapped into it a little bit, Kyle, without even realizing you did it. The NFL.
You're that sure I didn't know?
Yeah, being a league, they say, here's the way it is. Here's the way it is.
Exactly.
However, every conference has a different setup with the television partners.
Right.
Every network has a different setup. So, like, you look at CBS Sports that runs 10 hours of commercials during a single football game. In fact, they actually have a policy. If the first quarter goes too fast, they backload it. Yeah. They're getting their commercial time, and they will backload the rest of the game to make up for it. So the NFL can say, hey, you're only going to have 2.5 minutes of commercials. That's it. You make it work. You want our product, you make it work.
Bingo.
In the NCAA level, every conference having their own thing, every network doing their own thing. It's, hey, you want us to broadcast yourself? We got to make our ends meet. We run the commercials how long we feel like doing, and you're going to deal with it.
Drew,
I'm in favor of
tapping into, for the record, by the way. Yes.
Now I'm in favor of. By the way, if those of you who are wondering, hey, didn't they install games to speed or rules to speed up the clock several years ago, and then they undid those rules? You're right. In 2006, these rules I thought at the time were draconian almost. In 2006, the game clock would start when the ball is kicked rather than when the receiving team touches it. And by the way, Wisconsin and Penn State, there was some controversy off of that. In a game between those two, Wisconsin figured out a hack where they deliberately went offsides on 2 straight kickoffs to run time off the clock at the end of the first half.
They got that from Belichick,
they got that from Belichick. Here's the one that was really draconian. On a change of possession, the clock would start when the referee marks the ball ready for play instead of on the snap. Now, it says this was the NFL rule prior to 1973. That one was really draconian. I think that when you change possession, the clock should start at the snap. Like that's I thought that one was really tough. Let me ask you guys real quick, just survey each of you. What rule would you install to speed up the game that has not been mentioned anywhere here? Kyle, I want to start with you.
The way I get around it is now, and forgive me, freshly off of the first weekend of XFL action here, covering our own Orlando Guardians featuring UCF's Terrence Plummer as the starting middle linebacker. But I think what would actually not only speed up the game, or at least make it feel faster for the viewing audience, is if they enact the officials review that the XFL does, right? Each coach gets one challenge for literally anything, and then the office in New York and their edition of whoever Dean Blandino would look it over. And then that could also be the part of the experience as well, because what I come to find watching actually the Guardians game in particular, the first touchdown of the game, the first score in Guardians history, went to the booth like this. And you watched that whole exchange of them. You saw the videos they saw. You heard the conversation. It isn't like now when, you're, and I'm not going to call the American out because they're not the only conference, but a UCF game, there's something like that happens. They won't put the video up on the Jumbotron in the stadium and they hide behind it like it's some sort of government operation or something. No, make it transparent, because while that does take time, and rightly so, it would also keep fans engaged, and you can make it, well, we're going to go to the Cheetos halftime or Cheetos official review with blah, blah. Now you got ad space to sell, and you get the best of both worlds, right?
I tell you what, that also puts that replay official on a bigger spotlight than even the on-field officials, I think. Like a guy like Dean Blandino, like he's used to being on TV. But, some other guy, I mean, that would be tough. And then, where's your central office? Is that at the conference office? So,
hey, listen, those are all.
What do you do on non-conference games?
Well, that could all be handled through the networks, if you ask me, Jeff, right? We have all these alleged college experts. Granted, don't make it Booger McFarland, but like somebody at ESPN or Fox or whoever.
What did Booger McFarland do to you, man?
He stole talented people's job of analyzing college football. Wow. That's what he did.
Wow.
Anyways,
oh, my God.
Listen, I said it. He's a great defensive tackle. He's not a good analyst. I'm sorry. Listen, you said spicier stuff than this on this show, Eric Lopez. I want to hear it. Anyways, no, with all that in mind, and they also got Drew's name wrong, that network. Anyways, but no, I say all that jokingly to say, I think that's something that could be done through the networks. And you get a college name, they'll have the money to give whoever it is, the necessary credentials, right, to handle all that. And that could be done through a central office at the network. I think that would be, now granted, there may be questions about, well, the SEC is going to get the calls because of blah, blah, blah. Well, we could fish all that later, but don't tell me the logistics can't be worked out to make that happen.
Well, Drew, what rule would you? Oh, sorry, Eric. I want to get to.
Let me follow up on Kyle. Let me follow up on something about the replay. The NFL, one thing they've done very smartly, quietly, when there is a challenge, there's a review, they go straight to commercial, right? They don't stay, and then they come back. There's a ruling. I think college football should do the same. Go to commercial when there's a review. Don't stay there. I think that would help.
Yeah, you know what I would do is I would do the thing that we've seen in some parts of the NFL. If you go to a commercial during a replay review, put the replay review in the second box.
I mean,
like picture in picture.
If we got,
so we can see the replay while the commercial, while the ads are running. Drew, what rule would you add?
I would almost say like enforcement of current rules, such as like forward progress when you go out of bounds, keep the clock running. The NFL does a better job of keeping the clock running in out of bounds situations, bringing the ball back more so than college does. You see a lot more stoppages in time. Part of that's because of the whole first down thing, which will go away. So I think, and it comes back to the issue of conference officials. Get rid of conference officials. Standardize better.
I agree with you on that one, but how would that speed up the game?
I was going to ask
because they would actually, get the calls right, which means you would have to have less reviews because you have a standard of play, thus make it a little more efficient.
See, you were getting on my case.
I like how you landed that, Drew. I'm not going to lie. That was pretty clever.
Y'all were giving me a hard time for Booger McFarland. Where are you for this, Eric? This is spicy.
Yeah. Eric, what rule would you add other than, shortening quarters to 5 minutes?
Oh, that would be wow.
Play it like Tecmo Bowl where the seconds go like
I love Tecmo Bowl.
4 game second clock.
No, Tecmo Bowl was my favorite game.
On Tecmo Bowl, actually, unless you went out of bounds, the clock would stop after 7 seconds.
I think Kyle and Drew have nailed it perfectly. I mean, again, I don't think this is very complicated. I really don't. That's what frustrates me. It's like, I really think there's are simple things that will cut like at least 20, 25 minutes in a game and just get a better pace of the game, get a better product in the game. Because, I mean, people complain about baseball going forever. I mean, if you're watching a college football game or you're in person, it seems like it's lasting forever. And
yeah, but baseball's already boring, so...
Well, let me take my thing and knock and push it a little bit forward. Doug Gabriel was 2002 at Penn State.
Yeah.
Actually was interviewed, and he said one of the officials there told them that they're not going to win there, and some calls were kind of missed. Like, we don't, you're not winning with that kind of play here. He flat out said conference official, which was a Big Ten official for that game, basically messed up their chances of winning. Because if you remember, Penn State, that game got down to the wire. It was a 3-point game. It was actually
27-24.
Yeah, Kyle and I were at that game.
Oh, that's the Larry Johnson game, sure.
Yeah, that was when they first opened up the expansion, and by the end of the game, you could hear a pin drop. But Doug Gabriel was interviewed and basically said the officials said that you're not going to win. Georgia 1999, the Phantom Call, home cooking referees. Get rid of conference officials, and you have a better chance for some of this BS to go away. It messes up the game, which slows things down.
Man. I think the problem is not the fact they're associated with a conference, although I agree with you. I mean, get rid of it. It's stupid. But I think you're giving them too much credit. I think they're just incompetent in general. But trust me,
Nice.
the football has
come back to this. I always come back to this. Everyone always complains about officials in every sport. What's your alternative?
Robo-umps, robo-officials. I mean,
we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
There you go.
We're not there yet. I can't even get ChatGPT to recognize that Dylan Gabriel did not play for UCF in 2022.
Well, I mean, maybe he did. And that was why Oklahoma struggled.
I've got one. Here's the thing. This would be my rule change if I was made college football emperor for one day. If you are up 40 points in the second half,
yes,
good call.
Running clock.
Wonderful.
Running clock, baby.
40 points in the second half, running clock.
By the way, I'm not even opposed to.
And by the way, I'll shrink it. 35 points at the start of the fourth quarter running clock.
Nice.
How about this? You can even do a run rule. If the game is like a 50, 60-point game, like why are we playing another snap and
hey, it worked
putting the
for
risk
UCF
of a player getting
Cincinnati
injured
in 2017? You know, they
right.
The weather,
right, but we had to call upon it wasn't the officials who made that call, it was Mother Nature.
the weather mercy ruled the game.
No, I agree with that. That's a good call. I like that rule a lot.
I think you'll have a hard time. I think you'll have a hard time instituting that for conference games, but I definitely think for non-conference games,
I agree with that.
I would institute that. Or I would institute a running clock if one team is up by 35 or more in the fourth quarter.
Right, I agree. Coaches are going to complain because they want to get all their players in. But my argument to that is then don't complain when you get injured.
Dude, that's what practice is for. Come on.
Exactly. I like that rule a lot, though. I like that rule a lot.
That's what because I think, if you have a really close, high-scoring game, it's like, as a fan, I don't want that to end. I'm excited. I'm engaged. The games that as a fan, if I'm watching on TV, that bore the living tar out of me is when Florida State is playing, Tarleton and it's 63-14 with 10 minutes to go in the third quarter. I'm like, I'm out of here, man.
Games we're addressing, right? I don't think we're addressing, Michigan, Ohio State, right, Buckeye? I don't think
we are
addressing
Georgia TCU though. Georgia TCU. We definitely needed a running clock in that.
Okay. Yeah. Georgia TCU. Well, would you do that in a postseason game?
No.
In a game like that, yes, I would.
I would have
the championship game.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
not.
If it's 65-7, 65-7. What are we playing for? It's 65-7.
I would do it. I would start with non-conference games.
I agree.
But in playoff games, no, we play that thing out.
We're going to play a 65-7 game? Why?
Yep.
Hey, listen, I had to sit through in the Citrus Bowl with Purdue and LSU. I get it. I had to live that life. The biggest blowout in Citrus Bowl history.
There's just something about like there's just
bowl contracts.
Well, there's just something about like doing that in a playoff game. I'm like, no. Like, could you imagine if they had run rules in like the Major League Baseball playoffs? I think they should have run rules in the regular season, but in the playoffs, no.
But baseball playoffs, very rarely it's a blowout. I mean, again, we're really going extreme here. Like the odds of a 65-7 playoff game in college.
That's
football
my point, right?
That's the other point too.
After the fact of I saw a 12-run comeback in Major League Baseball in the seventh inning on.
I only approve of playing through a 65-7 game if Andrew's wife is part of the broadcast, like she was for the opener, because that kept us entertained. Works
if it's her team involved. Otherwise, it's like she does. It's like don't care itis. But if it's a UCF game, by God.
Well, I'm glad you're a team she's rooting for, Drew.
Someone has to.
Yeah, God. All right. Let me. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, okay, Kyle and Drew are going to dip out here. When we get back, we're going to have Nick and Bryson on a talk.
You notice how Kyle sounded better? You notice how he sounded better talking football all of a sudden?
I know. I saw it. Like the color came back to his face. You know, it's coming back.
You know what helped was Drew talking about the NIT and giving UCF postseason basketball a chance. I'm with that.
I'm in. All right. And Drew is at Statboy Drew on Twitter. Kyle is at the SOTG for the student of the game. Make sure you follow them in the upcoming week as well for any football and UCF basketball news. All right. When we get back, Nick and Bryson pop in. We're going to talk softball. We're going to talk baseball. We're going to catch up on women's basketball and all the other goings on at UCF when we return. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll be right back. We're back here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff and Eric with you, joined by Bryson and Nick to do a little roundup here at the end. And we are going to lead with UCF softball. I know baseball started this weekend, but they played Siena for like the umpteenth year in a row to start the season. We'll get to that sweep in a little bit. But we got to talk about softball out of the Tax Act Clearwater Invitational, Eric Lopez. You were out there. You have the sunburns to prove it. 3 ranked teams. UCF goes 1-2 against the likes of Michigan. They got a win against Michigan. Lost to Duke in 10. Lost to Alabama in 8. But finished also lost to Texas A&M 7-0 in their second game. But beat Mississippi State on national television on ESPN2 in prime time 6-5. You have your article up on your Around the Bases article up on the site. But I wanted to get your takes right here. All right, so 2-3 weekend. Last year they went what? 3-2?
2-4. They went
2-4. Okay, so 2-3 this past weekend in Clearwater. And by the way, that was on the heels of an 11-8 loss against number 23 Mizzou. So, okay, record's 5-5. But I'm guessing you're going to tell me, put that aside, and let's just talk about the quality of play overall right now, because that was a pretty solid showing over in Clearwater, no?
Yeah, it really was. And in fact, the polls have just come out as we record this. They're still in the top 25 in all the polls. I think they're 23 or 24, depending on which poll you look at. So obviously the pollsters respect it. Look, I'm telling you, this tournament is like a mini World Series. It's a monster event that ESPN's done a great job producing there, basically. You mentioned UCF on ESPN2 Sunday night, big exposure. It is like a World Series, thousands of people all over the field. And I do think it's funny when you're there, you get caught up in this, thinking this is like the biggest tournament of the year. The season's over if you don't play well, when its reality is just 2 weeks in. This team actually played better in this tournament this year than they did last year. Last year, they got run rolled, I believe, a couple times during the tournament. They got blown out in like 3 of the games they played last year. So you look at this year, they beat up on Michigan, the rematch from the regional final, which was basically a made-for-TV matchup. They overpowered them. They played a clunker against A&M. A&M outplayed them in that second game. And then Saturday, the Duke-Alabama game were incredible games. The Duke game has one of maybe the most controversial call in the history of against UCF softball that I can remember, where really UCF in the top of the 8th, they go by the international rule. They have a runner at third. Jada Cody hits a fly ball to right. Jazz scores to go up 4-3. They throw to third, and they call her out for leaving early. I'm 50 feet away. She did not leave early. I've left earlier to go get fast food than she did leaving third base, okay? And I had
Was there any TV footage of that?
Yeah, there was TV footage. I wasn't there, but I had people blowing my phone up that were watching to say she didn't leave early. And the weird thing about it is normally in a play like that, the opposing team asks for it. There's usually a delay for it. In this case, they were like going right away. It was almost like the umps were looking for it. Maybe Duke kind of said something prior to it. Hey, look for this.
Like, watch it. They're leaving the bag early or something.
Right, because there was a lot of those calls during the tournament. I mean, don't even get me started the umpiring in the tournament, but it was a bad call. I'm not going to get
you started on anything having to do with any sort of officiating in any sport, but okay.
Drew was the one that was going off on the football side, all right? But no, it's a terrible call, and that's unfortunate because I think UCF wins that game if that run stands. They lose in 10 innings. They play Alabama, which was a fantastic game. It's one of the best games I've seen in person, back and forth. UCF couldn't hold a 4-0 lead. And then they come back Sunday night in another great game, beat Mississippi State, another one-run game. So I thought they played well. I know a lot of people are asking me about the pitching. Look, believe it or not, I wrote this on Black and Gold Banneret. They've actually given up lesser runs at this point in the season than they did last year at this point, which might surprise people by a margin. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't questions still. Certainly, Caitlin Felton kind of finally went deep into a game against A&M. Sarah Willis has the best stuff, but hasn't gone past the 4th inning yet. Will that develop as time goes? Who knows? That remains to be seen. But my point is, we're acting like, that last year's pitching was dominant from day one, and it wasn't. They struggled early last year, so you hope that the pitching improves like pitching did last year. Remains to be seen if that happens. The good news is you've got a great offense that can back you up. They've hit 15 home runs as a team already. To put that in perspective, in 2008, when they won the USA Championship in 69 games, they hit 15 home runs. So they have the offense. They've got that. They're battle-tested. And I think there's a long ways to go before we can make any evaluations on this team and what their peak is. But, yeah, it was a good tournament. You wish, obviously, you're 2 plays away from 4-1. I mean, that's it is what it is.
Yeah. All right, so they got later today, we're recording this on Tuesday, Louisiana at home.
Yep.
They're at Stetson Wednesday, and then they host a tournament with Gardner Webb, Louisville, and Purdue. Outlook for this tournament, what do you got? Or for this week, I should say.
Well, think about it. Think of how many games that is. You're talking, 7 games?
1, 2, 3, 4, 7 games. 7 games in 5 days.
That's a lot of games. So how do they handle basically a daily schedule? Louisiana is a top 25 team. They're a Sun Belt the favorites. They're a team like UCF. You could argue UCF and Louisiana alongside JMU have been the best non-Power 5 softball programs over the last decade or two. They have great tradition. This could be a slugfest. The Cajuns and UCF both have 9 players on their rosters that have already hit a home run this year. So you got 18 players on both rosters combined that have already hit a home run. There's 25 home runs combined between these two teams. If the wind's blowing out in Orlando, it could be a shootout again. So look for that's gonna be a fantastic matchup.
Better tell the left field crew to watch out, man. There's gonna be some car insurance claims.
That's correct. Then you got Stetson. That's a renewal of the rivalry. They haven't played in a few years. They're up in DeLand. You know that Stetson circled that game as a big game. Louisville's a team that just missed the NCAAs last year. They're a better team this year. They can make the NCAA push. Purdue's from the Big Ten. So again, Power 5 teams. And this is an important home stretch here for UCF because then they go on the West Coast, where they're going to be playing the number 1 ranked team in the country, UCLA, a part of that West Coast trip. So it doesn't get easier. Yeah. We'll see if this pitching, you want to see this pitching develop more. Angelina DeVoe, who I now call Miss Clearwater, really stepped up as their ace as far as the bullpen's concerned. She now has 3 wins. Good. 3 wins in 2 years in Clearwater. So she's something about Clearwater. Hopefully, that goes. So yeah. I think she knows her role. Now it's a question of Willis, you got Grace Jewell, and you got Felton. Can they kind of develop into quality starters to go deep in the game so you don't have to go 4 or 5 pitchers? That remains to be seen. We'll see this week at home.
Yeah, DeVoe, by the way, 3-2 on the season with a 2.62 and a whip of 0.8, no starts. 8 appearances.
Welcome to it's baseball-esque, isn't it? It's like she's the main setup guy in baseball.
In 18 2/3, Eric, 15 strikeouts, 6 walks, and opponents are hitting 145 against her. So, and that's the best on the team. I think, and you were right. I think we got to get handed to Grace Jewell, I think, a little bit too, because she's made 2 starts, 4 appearances so far, ERA of 1.5, whip of 1.61. And doesn't have a win or a loss on her yet, unfortunately.
Yeah,
right?
It's got to play itself out. Defense kind of hurt her a little bit. I mean, Willis has the good stuff. So I want to see this pitching staff a little bit more. I agree with people that reached out. Yes, does it have to get better? Absolutely. I think Coach Bumelo would tell you that. They got to get better if they want to get to where they want to get to, which is a super regional World Series. They're going to have to get better, but it's still early. It's 2 weeks into the season. And I know everybody's freaking out because they're using so many pitchers. I can tell you, being in Clearwater, there are so many teams right now that are using 3, 4 pitchers in softball. It's become baseball, Jeff. Baseball has integrated itself to softball in a lot of ways.
I was going to say, do you think that that's a an ongoing trend that we're going to see from here on out, or is that like a early season thing where you're trying to feel out who fits into what roles?
All of the above. All of the above you mentioned. I think part of it is early in the season, you're playing a lot of games. Let's see what we have. Part of it is the transfer portal, Jeff. You got to make sure all your pitchers pitch because to keep them happy, right? Because otherwise they're like, well, if I'm not happy, I can bolt now. So that's part of it. Part of it's to technology, advanced technology. It hit people now can watch what a pitcher throws constantly. The other part of it is, and I've talked to many coaches, they're not as developed to throw deep into games anymore because in travel ball in high school, they're basically throwing 2-3 innings a game and that's it. So they're not mentally prepped to go pitch 2 games in a day like Allison Kime used to, or Lindsay Enders, or Mackenzie Otis, or Shelby. It's not that they're not capable, is they're not trained to do that in a high school club level. So a lot of times in the college level now, the coaches have to develop them to build the endurance to go deep in the games, because they're not used to throwing it. So it's a combination of those reasons that we're seeing more and more of this, is more pitching staffs to try to offset these offenses and try to keep as many pitchers happy because of the portal and developing them.
And even though they're playing, fewer games than they did back 20 years ago, I feel like a lot of these games are a lot more, I guess you would call high leverage. Right. High
leverage games. And remember, you notice there's not as many double headers midweeks as there used to be. I'm telling you, it's gone the baseball route. And, some people like that. Some don't. It is what it is. That's why we're seeing longer games in softball. Since this is a themed show about length of games, I will be fair that there is a concern around softball where games are going longer. And part of the reason is there's so many more pitching changes like baseball. Thanks a lot, Tony La Russa. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you.
Speaking of the segue there, let's go to baseball. I know this is kind of a little late to the party here, but UCF baseball got underway this weekend with a 3-game sweep of the Siena Saints. Yet again, Siena coming down. It's like it's a tradition unlike any other. UCF and Siena to start the season. Knights get the sweep 3-0. They scored 22 runs on opening night. Won 2-1 on Saturday, close game, and then run ruled the Saints on Sunday. Bryson and Nick, you guys were hanging out over there and checking things out. Everything would. By the way, UCF does play FAU Tuesday night at 6 before they head to Clemson this weekend for a 3-game series. But let's talk about this Siena series real quick. And Bryson, I want to start with you. Things that we noticed, anything of concern. I know that we had the one close game there. They weren't all blowouts, but overall evaluation of opening weekend.
I think one thing we definitely want to make sure we look at whenever we go into John Juliano Park, or really anywhere really, is what direction is the wind blowing? Let me explain. So on game 1, the wind was blowing out and the home runs just went flying. They tied a program record for the most team home runs in a game with 7. Ben McCabe alone hit 3. Nick Romano, of course, in his first game back since like March 8, 2022, hit 2. And then a couple of true freshmen, Drew Farrow and Brady Shannon, hit 1 apiece. So home runs were flying on Friday. On Saturday, the wind was blowing in. That didn't happen. In fact, they almost lost because they kept trying to hit for power and the ball wasn't going out. Greg Lovely admitted himself that there were balls hit that would have been home runs yesterday that were not home runs today. So it was only because Brady Shannon, watch the Greg Lovelady interview for the full quote, but he basically mentioned that Brady Shannon, who is a true freshman, by the way, had much bigger muscles than he did. Brady Shannon to muscle his way to hit a home run out beyond the right center field fence against the wind for a walk-off home run. So Saturday night, true freshman Brady Shannon really made his mark with that play there. Then on Sunday was where I think they learned, like, that Sunday I think is a much more prototypical game, because during that game is where you got much better with the line drives. You did get a couple of homers, one from Tom Jostin and one from Lex Bodeker, but that sort of game is the type of game you want to try to maybe have a lot more often, where you're able to get runners on base and get them home. John Rice Plumlee had a 2-run RBI, for instance. And then, of course, Dom Stagliano had a really great pitching performance. He was actually named the AAC's Pitcher of the Week. So the Stetson transfer really making an impact in his first start with the program. And oh yeah, Ben Vespi wasn't even among the starting pitchers this weekend because he was injured and they were kind of holding him back a little bit. I believe Lovelady said he could be back as soon as next week, as barring any setbacks. So even without Ben Vespi, the starting pitching group is looking promising. Not all the way. Rudy Gomez ran into a little bit of trouble late into his outing. Cam Leiter, while he had some solid stuff and was striking and struck out, what was it? 7 of the 19. Here it is. 7 of the 17 batters he faced, he struck out. The problem is that he walked 4 times. He walked 4 batters, which is why he gave up that 1 run that ended up being a pretty big issue for UCF because he wasn't getting offensive support. But that's not Leiter's fault. So Leiter did a solid job in his first appearance, and yeah, I think there's promise here. Now you could obviously make the assumption that, or make the notion that, it's Siena. The opponent's not really there. They're going to make a step up in competition level, as a lot of people have been talking about. But, I think no matter who you're playing against, you still got to hit the ball and you still got to pitch the ball and you still got to pitch the ball well. And I think that they did all right with it this time. I think this series lets us be very optimistic about this team. I think the fact that this team is much healthier is also very big because they're holding Ben Vespi back to make sure that he doesn't hurt himself even further. We know that Sundin is going to be coming back a little bit later on in the season. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about this team. I think we just got to keep on watching them, see what they do against FAU and Clemson, and just make sure they stay healthy. And that's something Mike Baroff said. We got to talk to him for the first time after Sunday's game. So all those videos and more, all those videos, much more, are on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, including one where we talked to former UCF pitcher and Siena pitching coach Joe Sheridan.
Joe Sheridan in the house. The FAU, real quick, they swept Monmouth, another old foe of ours from back in the day, earlier this week, 6-2, 14-8, and 17-2 to get off to the start there. So we talk about FAU against UCF baseball on Tuesday. Clemson swept Binghamton to start the season back home in South Carolina.
Tony Kornheiser's alma mater there.
Yeah, that's right. The Binghamton Bearcats. 11-3, 3-2, and 19-1. They play Charlotte on Tuesday before they face UCF. By the way, Clemson, a little bit of a down spell for them. They're picked 5th in the Atlantic Division in the ACC. Which
they got They got the new head coach Eric Bakich, who came over from Michigan. That was the big news in college baseball. He came over trying to resurrect the Clemson program. So that's going to be a big weekend here. Look, with respect to Siena, which, by the way, Jeff, I hate to break the news to you, but this is it for the Siena series. It's over. The tradition is ended. It's done. Greg Lovelady alluded to it in the Sunday presser. Remember, and he told us last week on the show, when you go to the Big 12, they're going up to 30 conference games in the Big 12.
Oh, that's right.
Up from 24. So there's going to be some casualties and Siena's going to be one of them. So as a result, and I'm okay with that. We're going to learn a lot with FAU. FAU is a good team, despite what even Noah Goldberg shout out. He's a Big Owls guy. He tells us how good, but they really are good. Unlike what I know Noah tends to think FAU is good at everything, but they're really good. And then they got Clemson. I think we'll learn a lot about this team more this week than we did against Siena. There's optimism. I think there's talent. I like the group, but now we're going to learn a little bit more. The competition level goes up a different level.
So does this mean we have to bid a fond farewell to our old buddy Tony Rossi, the longtime head coach at Siena, who longest tenured, Nick, is that right? Baseball coach in Division I. He's won 5 MAC championships, MAAC, 6 MAC Coach of the Year awards. The guy's been coaching at Siena since 1970, 53 years. And at the age of 79, he's a human institution for baseball. We've seen him many times. I mean, I remember when Siena used to come here, when I was a student, and he had been around for a mere 30 some years. So it's kind of a bummer. Old school. By the way, one little bit I wanted to drop in about FAU. They were picked 3rd in Conference USA, and Noah Shanuel, the preseason Player of the Year in Conference USA, plays for FAU as well. He's an outfielder, so be on the lookout for him, as well as starter Hunter Cooley, grad student from Vero Beach, who's a preseason all-conference selection in CUSA. So beware for that. Quick update on women's hoops. They play Temple on Tuesday at 6 p.m. In a Play 4K game. We're going to be wearing pink to that one. I'm actually doing PA for this game, so I'm pretty excited about that. UCF right now 11-13, 2-10 in the league. The latest on them, remember they were around 500, lost their 2 games this past week against South Florida, which you kind of figured. Close game at ECU, but they just couldn't pull it together, Elo. But they have 3 games left, 2 at home, Temple, Cincinnati, and then at Tulsa to close out the regular season. I'm thinking, if you're Satia Messer, what do you want to do in these last 3 games now?
Find some positives going into the conference tournament. That's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Build some confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they, if I'm looking at it, I'm like, hey, let's get to 500. Let's get to 500 by the start of the conference tournament. See what happens from there, and celebrate senior night on an up note too, because I know that they've been, first of all they beat Cincinnati, in Cincinnati back on the 8th, and there's a chance to go out on the home floor on a positive note. Bryson, Nick, what else we got that we wanted to talk about here? Oh, Nick, let me get you in here. XFL opened up this past week, and we saw some UCF guys play.
Yes, sir, we did. Terrence Plummer, Adrian Killens, and a couple others put on a show. Terrence Plummer and Killens were probably the most notable. Killens is probably the most notable out of all of them, because not only does he serve as his team's running back, he was their team's kick returner. He returned 3 kicks, including a pretty nice one for, I believe, about 33-ish yards. And then Terrence Plummer managed to rack up 2 tackles and assisted on 2 other tackles. Yeah. So,
hey, one other thing too about AK, and I think that this is interesting. I want to know what you take, because I was watching these games, obviously. The kickoff rule in the XFL is unique, where the kicker stands all the way back there. You have to land the kick at from the 20 back, right? And the returner sets up, inside his own 20-yard line, and the opposing coverage teams line up separated by about 5 yards. I think at the 30 and 35 of the returning team. Is that right? It was. I was looking at this, and I'm thinking, this is going to make it really hard to return kickoffs, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. If you followed the XFL back in 2020, this is either exactly the same or pretty close to how they did it. So, I wasn't surprised. I remember seeing this because I'm from Tampa, so I went to both Vipers games, so I watched that pretty closely. But I agree with you. I just felt they would catch a ball and then suddenly it'd just be oh, defender's already on him. So, I think there's positives and negatives. At the same time, though, it's you're more likely to get a return, which, I think it's more good for you guys were talking about timing with college football. I think this is good for keeping the clock running, which is why these games are closer to 2 hours than 3 hours.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Bryson, I wanted to get you in on talking about tennis here. The men's tennis team is really struggling right now. They had that long road trip. We knew this would be tough. and they lost to Miami 4-0, but they're back home for North Florida and Florida State. What's the plan right now? Because they're off to a 1-6 start, and again, just a tough schedule that John Roddick is putting his team through the ringer on here, isn't he?
He really is. I mean, the one thing we really have to make sure that I'm probably just going to keep on saying over and over and over again is that this team is young, extremely young. A majority of these players are freshmen. So a lot of this is just going to be them being kind of thrown into the deep end and just letting them learn on the fly. I mean, going against Miami, Bogdan Pavel and Leighton Cronhay did pick up a win in doubles play, 6-3. They're ranked number 48 in the country. So I think that individually keeping an eye on them would certainly be of interest because I think we could see some individual success out of them. But as far as from a team concern, they got swept by Miami. I mean, I could see them doing something against North Florida. I mean, they're going to be facing number 9 FSU. I think this is going to be another rough season, but unlike last year, where I think that last year this team probably could have done better, but didn't. This year, I think, is much more of like they're committed to the rebuild. You know what I mean? They're much more committed to rebuilding this team. And I do love the talent that this team has. I do think this team is talented. The problem is that they just need to get the experience. And unfortunately, you kind of need to have experiences like that in order to get some experience under your belt so you can move forward. So we'll see what they can do moving forward. But just remember, it's a young team.
Yeah, Friday against North Florida at home, and then number 9 Florida State comes in on Saturday this weekend, and then they have some time up before they go down to Boca to play FAU on March the 3rd. Women's tennis, they lost to 2 ranked teams up in Tennessee, up in Nashville and then Knoxville. Vandy, number 15, and Tennessee, number 24. They're back home for TCU on Friday, and Pepperdine, number 11 Pepperdine, a rematch of what was that, Eric? Sweet 16 a couple years ago when they went out to Malibu?
2019,
Yep. So, right now, women's tennis stands at 4-3 as they make their way through their schedule as well. Big news coming through track and field. This is the indoor championship week, Bryson. Who do you think we should be watching out for as the indoor championships? Because right after that, outdoor season starts, and Renaya Jones is. I imagine Renaya is going to have a pretty busy time of it. But she was the once again named AAC Track Athlete of the Week, and now there's some hardware on the line.
That is indeed correct, Jeff. So Renaya is, of course, someone you want to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on Deja Lampkin. Deja Lampkin transferred from Alabama. She has the 41st fastest 60 meters in the country and the 30th fastest 200 meters in the country. So she'll be someone to keep an eye on. Latasha Smith and Kia Williams are both within the top 50 400 meter runs in the country. So they'll be someone to keep an eye on as well amongst them. And also, of course, the 4x400 meter relay events. And then Kaylor Harris. We talk about Renaya Jones, but let's not forget about Kaylor Harris. Renaya Jones has the 12th fastest 60 meter hurdle time in the country. Kaylor Harris has the 20th. So Kaylor Harris is right there in the top 20 with her. Amongst the jumps, we have Ashira Collins, who has the 23rd longest long jump and the 26th longest triple jump. And then Jasmine Scott Kilgo, who has the 45th fastest long jump and the 44th triple jump. And don't forget to keep an eye out in the pentathlon for Natalia Madison and Holly Cassells. And then, of course, Isabella Richardson recently broke Anne-Marie Blaney's freshman record in the 3,000 meters. So keep an eye on her in the distance runners as well.
All right. And then I just want to quickly recap some golf. We got the men's golf team is playing this coming weekend out in Las Vegas at the Southern Islands Collegiate. Women's golf is they're actually in action right now in Melbourne at the Moon Golf Invitational, hosted interestingly enough by Louisville of all people. But they're currently they finished Sunday in second. They're finishing the tournament today, and then they go to the Gator Invitational in early March to wrap things up. Or they go to the Gators Invitational, not to wrap things up. They still got 2 more tournaments after that before the American Championships. But golf, track, and field, we are in the midst of it right now for the in this spring equinox. And we got basketball obviously tonight, Tuesday night. We're recording this. More basketball on Wednesday. It's going to be a busy time, guys. Here we go. Baseball and softball underway.
Preserving my voice. You are as well, Jeffrey.
Yep. Got to get the salt water out. Keep it on. Gargle some of that, and then we'll be all ready to go. All right. Let's put a wrap on this thing. We got to thank everybody. Nick Porcelli 2, Bryson Turner. It's Bryson Turner. Andrew Glukoff, Statboy Drew, Kyle Nash, the SOTG. Eric Lopez, who is at Eric Lopez Elo. Thank you guys always for everything that you've been doing. I want a special shout out also to all of our incredible photographers, Derek Warden and Noah Goldberg leading the way. Make sure you follow our Instagram as well. Follow us on Twitter, UCF Banneret _SBN. Follow our YouTube channel where Bryson's just been killing it along with Kyle, getting the latest post-game stuff up there, which has been fun. We've been dropping that in our recaps. It's been, we've had plenty of good stuff for you guys to keep your eye on UCF sports, whatever sports you enjoy, we cover it. Also, don't forget, what am I forgetting? Let's see, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret as well. So, and again, we'll be following more basketball for you here as we finish up here, and we're almost to March, man. Here we go. It seems like football season just ended, and now we're all the way over and getting ready to finish up basketball, and we're going to have baseball, softball all the way through to June. Eric's going to be busy. 7 games in 5 days again, like we said earlier?
I'm calling 9 because I'm calling some of the non-UCF games.
Oh, that's right.
Because we're carrying them all on plus. So, yeah, I'll be pretty much on all week. Yeah.
Dang. Yeah, should I bring like a sleeping bag and some supplies over to the press box?
Caffeine is really the big caffeine. Bring it on.
We wanted to thank all of you who listened to us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Remember, next week will actually be our final show branded as the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, and then we will be rebranding the show to Night Shift after that as well. But again, you don't have to change your feeds at all. We will be maintaining the feed, and if anything changes on that, be sure to follow us, UCF Banneret _SBN, for all the latest on that. So for all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week. Enjoy all the sports we got coming this weekend, and we will talk to you guys next week.